Access has got some great tools for analysing your database and also for documenting your database as well. Now, database analysis is something that's useful to do even if you think your database is perfect. It's worth just getting the system to have a look through, and you can make sure that you haven't missed something. It's really easy to make a simple error, and then once you put all your data into your database, it can become quite long-winded and difficult to fix that error. It's much easier to fix it at design stage when there's no data in there than it is when there's lots of data in your database. The tools you have, you can use the database analysis tool, and it will have a look at any errors it thinks are in there, and it can apply some of the changes, or it can make recommendations to you. Often you will actually think, you know, that recommendation doesn't apply to me, and so many of the recommendations you will actually mark them and say, okay, I've seen it, but I'm not going to apply it. Occasionally you will find, okay, yes, I have made an error there, and there's something I can fix. And either you fix it yourself, or as I said, the system can automatically fix it for you. Database documentation is another thing you can use. Now, it's very important that you document your database. Often I've been to a client and been asked to improve their database, and you go through and you think, okay, yes, there's a problem there. And you say, have you got any documentation? Sometimes they have, but sometimes they haven't. And you find that change, you think, okay, well, I can improve your database. I can make it run faster by making this change. Subsequently, you find out that actually there was a reason for that design change. So you make the change and it causes something to not work properly, or maybe not work at all in their database. And then you realise, that's why they did it that way. It was a bit unusual, but it was to support a specific business need. Database documentation should go in and actually list any of those changes you've made away from normal design. The database documenter in Access actually goes through and lists every property of every object in your database. So all of your tables, all the fields, all the data types, all the properties, all the queries, reports, forms, everything is listed in there. It's a great way of actually having everything output and being able to see all of the properties. However, you do need to add to that, to add any of those changes that you've made away from standard design to make sure they're listed as well. So just to reiterate, good database documentation is essential if your database is then handed on to someone else to maintain. The table analysis tool allows you to use a process called normalization. Now, we're not going into the depths of database design on this course, although I would recommend you look into it after you've done this and make sure your database is normalized and you look into database design. Very briefly though, what normalization is having only one version of each individual item. So what I mean by that is, if you have an order and that order is made by a salesperson, obviously I need to have that salesperson's ID entered. But do I need to have their name, their address, their salary, their manager, their telephone number? All of that information would be repeated on every single order that salesperson makes, and if they change their telephone number, it needs to be edited on every single one of those orders. So normalization is a process of saying, actually, you would be better off by putting that salesperson in a separate table, because a salesperson is a separate entity to an order. They are separate types of object. So normalization is that process of saying you shouldn't have repeated information. It can go far more technical than that, but as I said, that's a little bit beyond what we're covering here and is into very advanced database design. But using the table analyzer is a useful way of getting the system to have a look through and try and find any areas where it suspects that you've broken those normalization rules and should have separate tables, and it will actually run through a wizard and help you to create those tables. So now let's have a look at using those built-in tools to analyze your tables and analyze the database.